All right, so a little bit more on immortality and related issues. Um, some of this is going to be a little bit speculative, but it's always fun to do that from time to time. One question that I've asked myself is whether accessing or acquiring immortality is possible on the plane that we currently inhabit, on this physical plane. I know there are alchemists who over the millennia have thought that that's possible. And so I tend to think that if the race towards immortality among alchemists has taken that kind of feverish obsession, it's because there's something in the ancient past that some ancient knowledge or ancient tradition that would suggest immortality is possible to acquire. But again, it would involve some sort of alchemical process. And whether that's purely spiritual alchemy or another form of alchemy or a combination, like I said, I have a feeling, I believe that the immortality we have is not like innate to us as individuated beings. So it would require some regular ingestion of some potion or food or something of that nature, which is consistent with all of the ancient legends and myths that we see all around the world going back thousands of years. Not least of which is the story of the tree of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life in the garden in paradise in Genesis of the Bible. But it's all over the place. It's in Egypt and China and lots of different places. So I don't know. I don't know on that question, but I suspect that yes, there's a possibility that one could acquire a kind of a life extension that way. Regardless, it is possible to achieve higher states of consciousness, and it is possible to rise to higher planes of existence through things like meditation, through things like mysticism, mystical contemplation, through a sort of intimate divine fellowship in the heart and in the other energy centers could be involved as well, depending on the nature of your practice. I think that's possible to acquire these higher realms, obviously, without that has nothing to do with whether you have access or not to a tree that grants you immortality. I think that we can rise or descend along that ladder of the different planes or dimensions, quite apart from having access to a food like that that imparts immortality. But I think this food could be acquired in any domain, in any dimension, potentially. And then, of course, I think that there is a plane that represents the highest plane, and I'm not claiming to know how many planes there are or anything of that nature, but I think there's obviously a plane above which there's no other that represents the highest plane, where one would eventually acquire immortality, again, of the type that I described in the previous video. That is more or less permanent, although there would be one particular way that one could potentially continue dying, which is to do battle with the forces of evil, and that the forces of evil on that plane of existence would have a way to inflict a mortal wound on us. But all the normal means of death or mortality would lose their power, so we wouldn't have to worry about that. Now, whether or not we would have to continue doing battle with the forces of evil in a realm like that, or whether we would be shielded from that altogether in that realm, I don't know. It's possible that we would be shielded from it, but there would be the option of volunteering to do battle. So it could be that it's an innate part of all realms of existence where we do battle with the forces of evil, or it may be that once we reach the highest level, that becomes a voluntary thing. But again, because there's no realm of Platonic forms or any realm like a non-differentiated non-dual realm where the individual gets swallowed up and absorbed and annihilated, we have, I think we've done a pretty clear and thorough job of showing that that is not possible, that type of monism is incoherent philosophically and illogical. Because when God differentiates himself, he's not diminishing himself in any way. His nature doesn't change. His person doesn't change. He doesn't become less divine. So why would the individual then have to get reabsorbed or reassumed back into some infinite mass of sameness where there's no distinction? True non-duality can comprehend a world of duality which is simply exists within and is preserved by the non-dual. So there isn't a contradiction between the dual and the non-dual as long as they exist in a certain simpatico relationship that preserves the distinction between the two, while recognizing at the same time that they have a certain strong compatibility which unites them from all eternity. That is true non-duality, rather than creating a duality between the one and the many, which everyone is prone, most people, the vast majority of people are prone to do. There isn't a duality between the one and the many, but everyone keeps doing that. The Kashmir Shaivites do it, the Advaita Vedantists do it. Most people do that. We did show that Sufism does not make that mistake, which is why I quoted Ibn Arabi a few videos back. But, and I think there may be a school in Vedanta called Beta Abeta, which also does not make that mistake. But it's a tiny sect, and most people are not familiar with it in the West. Now, one other thing I thought it might make sense to talk about in this video, even though it may not be directly related, it's somewhat related. It's fun to sort of speculate on this, and I think, I talked about our genetic creators who are interdimensional, as per the Sumerian texts, Sumerian legends. I don't think that that by entering our realm or being able to take on physicality, was that a regression for them? Was that a descent in a spiritual sense? I don't know. I don't know if they simply have an advanced technology that allows them to walk back and forth between dimensions, or if that actually constitutes a spiritual regression for them. If that led to a lessening of their quality of life, the fact that they accessed that, did that lead to consequences for them in terms of, again, in terms of their quality of life? Did it cause a degree of suffering for them that they didn't experience prior to that, or were they innately capable of doing that because of the fact that they existed on a higher plane than we do? Did that make them innately capable of walking back and forth between dimensions? Again, I really don't know. But what we do know of their character is that they certainly were not perfected in their characters. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing the things that they're doing. They wouldn't be involved in some of the the tyrannical exploits that they have been involved in politically, like we see in all of the world's texts and myths and, about this, about their exploration of planet Earth. So I don't think they had acquired a perfection. Now, certainly, like I said before, we don't acquire immortality the way God in his transcendent aspect does. But I do think that we, in our spiritual evolutionary development, we do acquire a perfection of character. We embody spiritual qualities and spiritual virtues to such a degree that we are no longer able to regress or descend spiritually. So once we reach a certain state, or reach a certain plateau, a particular dimension or plane of existence, we don't fall back below that. And I say that because even though it is our nature as individuated beings to be capable of dying, to be capable of mortality, even when we have acquired this conditional immortality, what differentiates our sort of the apogee of our spiritual evolution from when we first entered into existence as individuals, is that at the end of that process we have acquired a vast amount of experience and knowledge, which would combine to cement us in this spiritual state of maturity. Not that we have entered into a realm of forms a la Plato, but rather it's not something that in which we lose our freedom or our free will. It's more a voluntary thing. We have acquired this level of maturity that results in our not desiring or wanting to descend, to go back to the foolishness and that we had to experience, or the suffering that we had to experience prior to acquiring that higher state of existence. So I think that's the last point I wanted to make in this video, and I'll go ahead and get this uploaded soon here.